Okay, dear friends, it is time to start. We're starting just on time. It's good to see you all. And let me introduce myself. And first of all, I'd like to welcome you all to our course. And today we're going to talk about effective meetings. And as I said, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Alexei Konobiev. I hold a PhD degree and I work at Moscow State Pedagogic University as an associate professor. And during our course, we're going to cover a lot of business topics, but frankly speaking, these topics are going to be useful not only in business communication, but also there are going to be quite a few of techniques, which I hope will be useful in everyday life as well. So today we're going to talk about effective meetings. And as you have understood, the course is going to be in English. But since we all have different levels of communication ability, different levels of English, please feel free to tell me if I'm speaking too fast, or for that matter, if I'm speaking too slow. And if you do not mind, I'm going to repeat the key points in Russian from time to time, because we really want everybody to feel comfortable. We really want everybody to understand everything. And we really want everybody to make as best use of this course as possible. Okay, so as you understand, we have the chat in which I'll be happy to read your questions and comments, and I'll be happy to answer them. And we're going to have a question and answer time at the end of the webinar as well. So feel free to post your questions. I will try to reply to all of them. We also have a Telegram channel for this course. So in case I miss any of the questions, feel free to repeat them. And if needed, please do feel free to ask them in the Telegram channel, because that's another thing we can do, so that you will get your answers, you will get all the information you need, and hopefully everything is going to be okay. Right. Thank you so much to those who say that my rate of speech is comfortable. And by the way, since we're all here today, we're going to start with the first module of the course, which is called Effective Meetings. And now that we talk about the effective meetings, what I'd like you to do is have a look at some statistics, because this statistics is absolutely astounding. Just look at that. This statistics comes from the USA, but I think it can be applied with a certain degree of correction to so many other countries as well. So just look at this. More than $35 billion a year is spent on unproductive meetings. Per day, there are 25 million meetings in the United States of America. Collectively, 15% of the organization's time is spent in meetings. Just imagine 15 minutes, 15% of an hour is basically about 12 minutes per each hour. Just imagine a typical working day, which normally lasts for about 8 hours, sometimes more. And just imagine that out of 8 hours, you will spend about, well, let's put it this way. So we have 12 minutes multiplied by 8. So basically, about 1 hour and 15 minutes is going to be spent on meetings. By the way, how does that compare to how many meetings you normally take part per day? And when I talk meetings, I mean not just conversations with your colleagues, but very formal meetings, like departmental meetings or meetings with the clients and so on. So what is your experience? How does this statistic compare to your experience? They also say, the people who did the survey and collected this data, that 37% of people's time is often, or managers' time, is spent in meetings. Thank God it is just for managers, not for every employee, but still that's a huge amount of time. Managers attend more than 60 meetings per month, and during a session, 39% of meeting participants admitted to dozing off. Just think about that. 39% of people fell asleep during meetings. Not for a long time, obviously, but still that also tells you something about the quality and the importance of those meetings. And according to an estimated report, 25 to 50% of meeting time is wasted. And this is terrible. These figures are absolutely terrible. Okay, so let me have a look at some comments. All right, I hate meetings actually. Will it be possible to get access to the meeting record? Yes, the record will be there, will be posted on YouTube. For those who are watching us on YouTube, you will have the videos posted there, and the links will also be posted on the Telegram channel. Okay, don't have meeting at all because I'm working on a distance. Okay, well, even distance workers often have to take part in meetings. 7+ hours on meetings almost every day. This is incredible, and incredible not in a very good way, I should say. More than 60% of the working day on the remote mode, more than 85%, mostly a waste of time. If you enjoyed it, the time wasn't wasted, says Dmitry. Okay, 60 meters per month. It's nothing. It's just 3 meetings daily. Okay, so our statistics is even more terrifying than the one we had there. Okay, so what else? Let me have a look at some comments on YouTube as well. Right, some people are asking whether all the lessons are going to be in English. So let me switch into Russian for a second. Okay. Итак, дорогие друзья, те на YouTube, кто спрашивают, все ли у нас будут уроки по-английски, давайте сделаем так. Большая часть будет на английском языке, но я, естественно, буду ключевые моменты периодически повторять по-русски. Так что я надеюсь, что вам все-таки будет удобно. Хорошо? Поэтому попробуем вот таким образом сделать. Поэтому надеюсь, что все у нас получится. Okay, so 1 meeting per week, 1 or 2 hours per day, 1 meeting a day. So we have different statistics, but at least the experience of those people present in the lesson shows that, unfortunately, we spend a lot of time on meetings as well. So how can we make these meetings effective? What can be done? What can we do to make meetings more productive, at least more as compared to what we have now? There are a few things that need to be considered. First of all, the most important thing to begin with is to have a clear purpose. That is to ask yourself the question, what outcome do you want to get from this meeting? What are you going to achieve? Now, it may seem that this question should be asked by the organizers of the meeting. And yes, it is true. First and foremost, this question should be asked by the organizers of the meeting. But also, if you're going to attend something, it is important for you to know as well what good is going to come out of this meeting for you, for your work, how it is going to make your work easier, how it is going to make your work more productive. That's why it's important to understand, because if you know beforehand that this meeting is not going to be productive, perhaps you can make some suggestions. Okay, so Yaroslav says, I don't have meetings. I'm a doctor radiologist. Well, that's great. That's really great. How much every lesson will take? Well, every lesson lasts for about 1 hour. Okay, so some more comments. It would be better to be all in English, say some people. Well, the Russian summing up is not going to take a lot of time. Okay, so I work as a manager and spend minimum 50% of my time on meetings. All right. So basically, here is a list of some possible purposes. For example, sometimes the purpose of the meeting is to share information with the team. Sometimes you want to discuss possible solutions to a problem. Sometimes you want to work out a plan. There can be some other purposes as well. So for those who take part in meetings often, could you please write either your most favorite purposes or your least favorite purposes? Like, for example, what purposes would make your meetings more productive? Write a plus if this helps the meetings to become more productive, or write a minus if this is the purpose which you do not like and which you think makes the meetings unproductive. Okay. So while you're writing this, let me continue, and then we'll compare the answers. But let me do it this way. I will recap in Russian what we have been talking about. Итак, самый первый шаг, как сделать совещание более продуктивным, потому что статистика и опрос, который мы сейчас провели, показывает, что очень много времени уходит на совещание, и много времени, к сожалению, уходит впустую. Самый первый шаг – это как можно четче определить цель этой встречи. Цели могут быть самые разные. Например, поделиться информацией с командой, обсудить различные решения проблем, разработать план какой-то, что-то еще. Но тем не менее, прежде чем начинать совещание, любую встречу, необходимо для себя как можно четче сказать, что полезного будет в этом совещании, какой будет результат для всех участников, не только для того, кто это совещание организует. Okay. So there are several types of business meetings, at least these types, even though you can find many more subcategories. So you can have team building meetings, and they are important because they help the team to get to know each other better. And these team building meetings can take place outside the office. They can take place in pubs, in cafes, on sports facilities, anywhere. There can also be innovation meetings where you discuss the new things that somebody is going to introduce or that are going to be introduced in your office, or things that you would like to have introduced. Okay. There are also information sharing meetings. And while it is true that very often it is so much easier to send the information out as a circular email so that everybody would get the email. But frankly speaking, tell me, please, how many emails do you get per day? And what percent of those emails do you really pay attention to? Do you read 100% of those emails? Okay. So what else? My approach to make a good meeting agenda, deadline, and 6 participants as maximum. Okay, that's really great. Mikhail Romanov says it's a good idea to use a visual desk like Miro. All right. So that's a great idea, and we're going to talk about that. Okay, I'm a mad person, and I read all the letters, says Julia. Well, this is fantastic. I try to read all the letters, but frankly speaking, I get a lot of mail, which I do not think is important at all, unfortunately. Alexei says, I get about 100 plus emails, and only 2 or 3 really concern me. 50 emails, and out of them, about 10 to 12 emails are useful. So this goes to show that, unfortunately, if you send out even important information as a circular email, not everybody is going to read it. That's why information sharing meetings are important as well. Okay, I see that some people are joining us, but could you please, can I please ask you to switch off your mics after you've joined? All right, because otherwise there can be some background noises that can make it a little bit more difficult for other people to understand. Oh, Lydia says, I get about 10 letters and I read all of them. And Vadim says, I read all emails since it's a compulsory part of my workflow. All right. So some people say, 80 or 100% of letters can be useful. More than 100 mails as work post, but automated rules help a lot. Yes, that's true. But very often the danger is that if information is just sent out, it's not going to get to the addressees. So sometimes information sharing meetings can be important. There can be also status update meetings. In some companies, they're very, very regular, like, for example, every week, where they sum up the results over the week. There can be decision-making meetings where you need to make a decision. There can be problem-solving meetings. There is a problem that needs to be solved, and we need to get together to work out some ways of solving it. And there are also reflect and improve meetings. Now, reflect and improve meetings are very frequently called retrospective meetings. And that's where people from different departments or from the same department get together and they tell about the problems they had and how they solved those problems. Or probably they tell about the problems which remained unsolved, because this is really very important. Because first of all, you share your successful experience, your solutions, and your ideas that definitely work. Or sometimes when you tell a problem that remains unsolved, there will be people who say, oh, let me tell you how to solve it. And they will help you to do it. All right. So this works like that. So there are different types of business meetings according to their purpose. Now, who should participate in those meetings? Once again, as somebody said earlier, it's a great idea to get no more than 6 people participate in the meeting, but it is not always possible. Sometimes we really need to get more people. Like, for example, you need to invite people who have relevant knowledge. You need to invite people who are crucial to the implementation of the decisions, because you can decide on a lot of things, but unless there is somebody who has the authority to implement those things, they will not go anywhere. Then you need to invite decision makers who have direct authority over the points of discussion, some team members who probably not only have relevant knowledge, but who may have some other knowledge, which may not seem relevant at the beginning, but they can still contribute meaningfully. And then there are professionals who are most affected by the problem being addressed. Okay? Как обычно, немножечко суммирую по-русски. Итак, разные типы совещаний бывают в зависимости от их цели, разные типы встреч. Но какая бы цель ни была, все равно именно от цели зависит, кого мы будем туда приглашать на эти совещания. Чтобы не получилось так, что вас позвали, вы просидели и потом задаетесь вопросом, а что я туда ходил, зачем я столько времени провел. И вот целый список тех людей, которых надо приглашать, и, соответственно, всех, кто в этот список не попал, их приглашать, пожалуй, не стоит. То есть те люди, у которых есть необходимая информация, те люди, которых больше всего затронут решения, которые должны приниматься на этом совещании, те люди, которые имеют достаточно власти для того, чтобы внедрять решения, которые принимаются, ну и, соответственно, те, кто принимает решения в компании вообще, потому что иначе можно принять решение, но оно никуда дальше не пойдет, естественно. Это все вроде бы базовые вещи, но тем не менее они действительно важны. Okay, back to the ingredients of a successful meeting. Now, when it comes to meeting time, do you have a set time for meetings in your company? Or do you have any times when meetings just do not happen? Like, for example, you don't start meetings at the end of the working day or probably during lunch break or whatever. The thing is that it is really important to decide on when meetings are taboo. Like, for example, during the first half hour of the day, because people are they need some time to get into the flow of things. At lunchtime, because people want to have lunch, they're hungry, and in the very last hour of the day. Now, when it comes to the last point, there is a funny thing about it, because I've read, when I was preparing for this presentation, I've read a lot of articles and a lot of recommendations from very large businessmen. And even though most of them say that it is a very bad idea to have a meeting in the last hour of the day because people are already thinking about going home, still there was one large businessman who said that he actually likes to have meetings in the last hour of the day because nobody is going to stay longer than they should. And that's why everybody is going to try and have the meeting over by the end of this hour. And that's why they wouldn't spend time on telling irrelevant things. It might be a good idea also, but most people do that, to automate scheduling and communication. Like, for example, by using Google Calendar, other similar tools, so that you just click on a list and the invitation automatically goes to everyone. Okay. Now, there are some people who are saying, okay, Julia says morning is the best time for meetings. Yaroslav says in the first half of the day is my point of view. Okay. Pavel says, I reject any invites to meetings in the beginning of the week and at the end of the week, Mondays and Fridays, because it's the most ineffective days for meetings. Okay. Some people agree on the first day, on the first half of the day. All right. So what else? Natalia says, I'm the luckiest person. I don't receive any emails. Well, that's great. In my company, the first half of the day on the 1st of September is non-meeting time. Well, that's also important. All meetings start about 11. Today I had a working meeting after the end of my workday. Yes, these things also happen sometimes. But all our work preferences work only in an ideal world. That's true, but at least these are considerations. And if you don't have those rules in your company, perhaps it might be a good idea to, I was going to say to call a meeting. Well, not to call a meeting, but to talk to the management and suggest a taboo on some meeting times, because that could really help to make the meetings more effective. Because I mean, in those intervals, meetings don't really work in most cases. Okay, let's continue. The next step is to set the agenda. And the more detailed the agenda is, the better. And if possible, it's a good idea to send it out in advance, sometime before the meeting. Not too far in advance, though, because if you send it out too far in advance, people are going to forget what the meeting is going to be about. So it might be a good idea not just to write down the agenda, but also to allot time for each of the topics. And you can summarize the meeting's agenda on a handout, on a whiteboard, on an interactive board. And it might also be a good idea to use headings, like, or to agree on some signs and to mark the items on the agenda, like, for example, this is going to be for information, this is going to be for discussion, and this is going to be for decision. And as they say, as business coaches say, a detailed agenda can reduce meeting time up to 80%. Now, I'd like to ask you a question as well. So tell me, please, when you go to a meeting, do you usually know very clearly what is going to happen, what points are going to be discussed, what's going to take place? Or do you just go and you only know the topic of the meeting? Or do you just go there and you have no idea what the topic is going to be? How does it work in your company? While you're writing, let me repeat this in English, in Russian, just to recap. Итак, следующий шаг важный – это написать повестку совещания. Причем хорошая идея не просто ее детально написать, но и написать, сколько времени выделяется на каждый из пунктов. И самое главное – разметить еще значками или заголовками условными. Например, для информации, для обсуждения, для решений. И тогда это будет работать гораздо эффективнее. Как утверждают крупные бизнесмены и бизнес-тренеры, детальная повестка совещания, детальная программа сокращает время совещаний до 80%. И вы знаете, я вот смотрю на эти вещи и думаю, господи, как было бы здорово, если бы в одной из компаний, где я работал раньше, была бы такая практика. Сколько времени экономилось бы. Просто потрясающе было бы. Okay. So Ludmila says 90% I know the agenda. Usually I come to meetings with a list of important points. I always have a topic before the meeting. I only know my part of the agenda. It depends, but very often I know only the topic. Usually we know the agenda of the meeting organized by our administration. Okay. In less than 50% of cases, I am prepared before, say people on YouTube. I know the agenda every time, but rarely the time allotted. But often nobody cares about the agenda. Now this is a different question. The thing is that all countries and all cultures can be subdivided into two large groups. One group is the time-precise cultures, where you have deadlines, you have agendas, you have to follow the agendas and keep the deadlines. And other countries are time-loose cultures. And when I say loose, I don't mean it as in a verb, loose. No, it's loose, like, you can have loose clothes, the clothes which is too large for you, like, a jacket which is too big for you. So yeah, it would be called loose. And in time-loose cultures, in time-flexible cultures, people say, okay, yes, we know the agenda, but who cares? This question is more important. Let's talk about it now. And then we can talk about something else later. Okay, it depends on people. Some people don't know the basic meeting rules. Yes, that's true. But as I was trying to say, it also depends on the culture of the country and the corporate culture, because in some corporations, in some companies, agendas are observed very, very strictly, even sometimes severely. And if you have, like, for example, 5 minutes to bring your point to the attention of the audience, you cannot exceed this time. If you try to exceed, they will say your time is over. That's it. It's your problem, which probably might not always be a good idea, but it helps to discipline people a little bit. Okay. If your meeting starts off the end of the working day, you're not going to there and explain it. Okay. You can tell that your device is not working. This is an idea suggested by Andrei. My boss uses this system, says Ksenia, for information, for discussion, and for decision. It's very, very convenient. Yes, it really is very convenient. Okay. It is not about the culture in a country, but it's about the business culture and expertise. Yes, well, but the thing is that business cultures are often explained by the company, by the country's culture, because if you live in a very time-loose culture, you may try to be time precise, but it's going to have a lot of problems when you try to implement it. And of course, it can be easier to implement it in a time precise culture. Okay, let's continue. So that's, for example, what a meeting agenda may look like when you give the time, the date, the location, the agenda details with the goals. Like, for example, This is the first point. That's how much time we have. This is the purpose of this discussion. Like, that's just to inform you, or that's to decide. Then you tell who is going to speak and who else is going to speak and for how long. And this is this is usually a very good idea. Now, it might be a good idea to also include a very short end of meeting review when the leader asks the questions like, what did we do well in this meeting? And what should we do differently at next meeting? It might also be a good idea to turn it from an opinion poll, because in some companies, these things are just never discussed. So as I was saying, rather than holding an open opinion poll, sometimes it might be a good idea to ask people to write ideas on sheets of paper and then to collect those sheets of paper, which do not have to be signed. So that's how it works very often. So here is another example of a meeting agenda. That's what it may look like. But of course, we may have some other ideas, but it might be a good idea to organize it like this. The next step is to set the tone and the atmosphere of the meeting. And here, once again, we are going back to the issue of the company's culture, because it really depends on the company, whether the atmosphere should be formal or informal. And also, when you have meetings with people from other countries, you need to consider the culture of the country. Because, for example, it is important to discuss whether people from those countries are going to speak themselves, or will you have to ask if they'd like to make a contribution. Also, in some countries, people will never think of contradicting their boss. So they will say yes to anything the boss says, or they will even say yes to anything that other people say. Because to say no would be poor etiquette. Like, for example, in India, they don't like to say no. So if you make a suggestion and they say to you something like, oh, we will see what we can do about it, that basically is a polite no. Because unless they say yes, they're not going to work on it. So just imagine that in our countries, for example, in Western countries, if you hear from somebody, oh, we will see what you can do about it, then in most cases, you will rather think that they're really going to think and probably do something, maybe not 100%, but they're very likely to do something. But in India, it means no. Now, let me tell you about a system of meetings which brought about a huge frustration. Those meetings were organized by an American company, and in this American company, developed a branch in Thailand. So basically, they had a lot of online meetings with the people from Thailand and with the people from the USA. Now, just imagine these two very different cultures. Americans, if they feel that they have something to say, they will say it immediately. So there is a meeting, it's time to discuss something, and the Americans will just jump into the discussion and tell their minds very directly. They will say very politely but openly what they think. In Thailand, to contradict other people is very impolite. They like to smile, they like to be nice to people, they don't like to contradict. Also, Thai culture is much more group culture than the very individual American culture. So a person from Thailand would hesitate to speak from the name of the department unless they have had some consultations with the colleagues, and he knows that this is their common decision. Like, they've all decided that this is what they think. So basically, the way it happened, in those meetings, Americans spoke a lot, whereas people from Thailand didn't say much. And after those meetings, the people from Thailand were really disappointed because they said, why did they call us if they're not interested in our opinion? The people from the USA were also disappointed because they said, well, why did they come to the meeting if they had nothing to say and if they had no ideas? And now this situation could have been solved very, very easily. The organizers of the meetings should just ask the Thai people if they'd like to participate and what they thought about those issues that were being discussed. because they needed a prompt to start speaking. They were waiting for this. And Americans naturally assumed that if somebody is not speaking, then they're not interested or they have nothing to say. And another good idea would have been for Americans to send the meeting agenda not just right in front of the meetings, right before the meetings, sorry, but rather 2 or 3 days before the meeting in advance, so that the Thai counterparts would be able to discuss those things and work out a common opinion or common attitudes. So that's very interesting. But in this way, cultures can be different and cultures can clash as well. Yevgeny says, what is the culture of the country? The culture of my country is current. Everything is tied to ancient customs. Well, the thing is that there are different dimensions in every culture, and those dimensions show in attitude towards time, in attitude to status, like whether people of lower status are allowed to speak or not, and whether they're expected to speak, who makes decisions, and so on. So things like that. And there can be many definitions and many dimensions. So before you start working with people from a different culture, it is a good idea to try and find out what works for them and what's not going to work for them. Because as I said, sometimes it may look like people are not interested and they're not eager to participate. Okay. What else? Mikhail says, in my company, all meetings, except those where tops come, are usually informal. Well, that's great, because it really depends on the company. I work for several companies. Like, for example, I work as a consultant for Skyeng. I work as an associate professor at Moscow State Pedagogic University, and working cultures are so different there. The university culture is highly formal, where you call each other by first names and patronymics, while at Skyeng, for example, everybody is required to call each other by their first name, and they're on very informal terms. And as I said, in different cultures, different decisions and different organization techniques work. So it's important to set the tone of the atmosphere. And according to the tone and of the meeting, there are different ways of how you can start a meeting. Like, for example, you can inform by telling the participants straight away what the purpose of the meeting is. You can try to excite the participants when you clarify what is important about the meeting for your participants. Like, for example, you can say, we have listened to your concerns about this particular issue, and we have decided to best help you by. So people will know that you're listening to them and that their meeting is held to address their needs. You can try to empower the participants by telling what contribution is expected from the participants and what you want to learn from them. Sorry, that's when you want to, that's when you expect them to participate, share their views, talk about solutions and offer solutions as well. Or you can even involve the participants by starting with an icebreaker or a question that requires an answer from most or everybody in the room. Okay, here are some other comments. I hate to interrupt other people, but often it's impossible to do otherwise. Но я немножечко еще разок тоже по-русски повторю. Мы сейчас поговорили о том, что очень важно установить тон и атмосферу совещания, потому что от этого может сильно зависеть то, как совещание пойдет. И проблема в том, что зависит это не только от культуры компании конкретной, как принято в компании. Например, где-то по имени-отчеству обращаются, где-то обращаются только по имени. Но это зависит еще и от того, какая культура в стране. И я рассказал пример коммуникативного сбоя, который произошел между компанией совместной, американской, у которой был филиал в Таиланде. Потому что у американцев принято высказывать свое мнение сразу же, как только они считают, что есть что сказать. Они не ждут, пока их призовут персонально к участию, они говорят то, как думают, и они говорят за себя, свою точку зрения. Тайцы очень групповая культура. Им надо сначала выработать общее решение. Им в голову не придет, что кто-то будет говорить от лица других людей, не получив на это официального согласия от остальных людей. Более того, у них не принято никого перебивать, и они не говорят, пока их не попросят персонально. Скажите, что именно вы думаете, и тогда он еще подумает, что он может сказать от себя, и как быть осторожным, чтобы не говорить от лица других людей. И вот получались такие совещания, когда американцы уходили разочарованные, потому что тайцы молчали. Их же никто не позвал, не спрашивал конкретно, что вы думаете. Им не давали повестку заранее за 2-3 дня, чтобы они могли посовещаться и выработать какое-то общее мнение. А тайцы тоже уходили. И американцы считали, что тайцам просто нечего сказать или им неинтересно. Тайцы тоже уходили разочарованные. Они говорили, ну подождите, а зачем нас звали-то, если никто нас не спросил персонально, что мы думаем? Мы вот так вот просидели, а нас даже не спросили. Это очень обидно. И действительно такие ситуации возникают. Поэтому посмотрите, пожалуйста, когда мы говорим о культуре, мы говорим не только о корпоративной культуре, но и о том, какие бывают межкультурные столкновения. Это тоже важно, и иногда это не менее важно, чем то, на каком языке мы с вами говорим, владеем ли мы языком, на котором говорят остальные участники совещания. И вот исходя из этого, есть разные способы, как начать совещание так, чтобы люди сразу поняли, что же их ожидает. Вот эти способы перечислены перед вами на слайде. Мы о них поговорили. Я не буду их по-русски повторять, с вашего позволения, потому что все-таки у нас курс английского языка, правда же? Поэтому можно будет использовать. Я просто хотел напомнить, что вот в рамках нашего курса мы будем говорить не только о языке, а мы будем использовать язык. То есть, посмотрите, у вас есть тренировочные задания, те, которые вы можете делать самостоятельно, те, которые вы делаете онлайн в рамках курса. И они помогают работать именно с языком. А на наших вот этих вот вебинарах мы с вами как раз говорим, мы пытаемся получить информацию на языке, который выходит немножечко за рамки собственных языковых упражнений. То есть нам эта информация нужна, то есть язык превращается в средство получения информации, а не в самоцель здесь. И мы как раз с вами и обсуждаем на этих вебинарах и получаем информацию о том, как и что можно сделать, на что стоит обратить внимание. Вот такая вот структура курса. Я надеюсь, что вы ее сочтете полезной. Okay, let's continue. Now, there are several ways in which you can encourage contribution from other people. For example, you can ask the participants to brainstorm some things. You can also talk about risks, tell what risks there are, and ask for ideas how to avoid those risks. And many people will have something to say. Or you can ask everybody's opinion of the ideas presented. But if this meeting involves a lot of people, you can shorten the time, because otherwise you can just talk about their opinions and not about solutions. So what you can do is you can ask people to make cards with pluses, minuses, and question marks. So somebody tells an idea, and everybody in the room raises a card, plus if they agree with it, minus if they disagree, and a question mark if they're not sure. So if the majority of people raise a plus sign, then this idea is going to be worked with. If the majority of people raise a minus sign, then this idea is not accepted. But the problem is that when you have a lot of question marks, then this idea is doubtful, but it can be risky, but very profitable. So it needs to be considered carefully at a later meeting. It is also a good idea to take notes and capture any and all takeaways from the meeting. Some discussion points, because it's important to remember them, some action items, what needs to be done, some key decisions, and even open questions, like, for example, questions that were not left that were not left solved. Sorry, that were not found the solutions. That did not find the solutions. I'm sorry. I'm trying to read comments in the chat. The comments are in 2 languages, and it's kind of difficult to keep thinking in 2 languages at the same time, because, when you switch into English, you normally think in English. When you switch back into Russian, you start thinking in Russian, because otherwise it's going to be quite difficult. Okay, Andrei suggests this explanation about this cross-cultural communication case. Maybe the Thais just didn't speak English well, and that's why they didn't speak in meetings. No. The problem is that the problem was so huge that they had to call for support. The Americans hired a counselor, and that counselor asked questions, they investigated the case, and then this cross-communication specialist helped the Americans to understand what was wrong with the way they organized the meetings, why the meetings were not productive. Okay, thank you about that. Lydia says, sorry because she wrote a comment in Russian. No, please don't be sorry, because what you wrote is very important, and it only confirms that the way I've decided to conduct these meetings is going to work for you. Because as I was saying in the beginning, it is really important because we really want you all to feel comfortable and to make sure that you understand these things. Okay, let us continue. And this is the next step. The next step is following the schedule. It's very important to follow the schedule and mind the timing. Why so? The thing is that once you have announced the meeting time, you have to start and to finish on time. If something is has not been covered in the meeting, something from the plan, that means that it's the planning fault. Somebody has underestimated how much time it's going to take. And to make it more productive, it's a good idea to set out a time for discussion and also to allot time for it, like, how long you're going to spend discussing things. It might also be a good idea to make clear the roles of the participants. Like, for example, you need to decide who is going to follow the timing, who is going to sum up the minutes, like, all the records of the meeting. This word is pronounced both as minutes and minutes. So if you like to say it as minutes when you talk about the agenda of the meeting, that's okay. That's fine. A lot of people pronounce it like that. So both variants are possible. And it is also important to make it clear from the very beginning. If the decision is going to be made by one decision maker and he or she only wants to hear the opinions of other people, or whether this is going to be a consensus or a vote, because in this way people will know what is expected from them and they will know what to pay attention to. Okay? Немножечко по-русски еще раз повторю. Очень важно не только следовать таймингу, следовать объявленному времени, начинать, заканчивать вовремя, а мы знаем с вами, сколько совещаний, к сожалению, вовремя не заканчиваются, иногда и не начинаются. Но еще и очень важно четко определить роли участников, кто ведет записи, кто суммирует все, кто будет делать рассылку после совещания, мы сейчас об этом поговорим. Ну и плюс еще и понять, чтобы участники понимали, кто будет принимать решение. Один человек, который хочет просто услышать все мнения, или же это будет какой-то консенсус, или вообще голосование будет. Так что вот как это работает. And the next point, which is very, very obvious, but once again, it's important to, I'd like to ask you whether all your meetings or how many of your meetings end like this. It's important to end the meeting with an action plan. So as they say, you should leave the last few minutes of every meeting to discuss the next steps. Like, for example, the discussion should include deciding who is responsible for what and what the deadlines are. So basically, you can always ask the question, who will do what by when? Now, tell me, please, what percentage of your meetings, the meetings you take part in, ends in an action plan? When you know exactly who is going to do what, when, and how. It's really interesting to compare your experience. Okay. Right, 80%, all of them, that's brilliant. 10%, well, this is amazing. Like, you see only 10% of meetings end in action plan for one person. All of them, 90%, approximately 15% each meeting. So you see how different we all are, how different our companies are. Now, you know what, even if you're not the organizer of the meeting, it can be very often a very good idea to ask this question in the beginning, like, so what shall we decide? Who does what? What are my functions? What should I do? When do you expect me to do it? Okay, I can say that it's less than 40%, says Ludmila. 5%, says one person, 99%, 50%. Now, just look at the at how the numbers spread. That's a very, very uneven spread. And this is amazing how different our companies are, isn't it? Okay, it depends on the meeting purpose, says Dmitry, but approximately 50%. Yes. And Ekaterina says, not often how, but always who and what. Okay, well, at least if you know who is going to do and what they're going to do, the next step is to ask the question when. Okay, let's move on. It may also be a good idea, and I'm sure that we would get a much more frequent reply in this case, to follow the meetings with notes. When you send out the key points and the decisions taken, along with who is responsible for what, once it has been decided. Повторю немножечко по-русски, как обещал. То есть, посмотрите, очень важно, чтобы совещание заканчивалось конкретным планом действий. Кто, что делает и к какому времени это должно быть сделано. Потому что если это не сделано, то, к сожалению, совещание можно назвать не очень продуктивным, какая бы у него цель ни была. Потому что в любом случае, даже если с вами просто делится информацией, все равно это некий план действий подразумевается, потому что информация дается не просто так, а чтобы ее можно было использовать в работе. Ну и, соответственно, после совещания имеет смысл сделать рассылку. Какие были ключевые моменты, какие были приняты решения, кто за что отвечает и когда. Потому что вы знаете, как бывают ситуации. Вы вышли с совещания, сейчас вы пока еще помните, о чем идет речь, о чем она шла. Но если это не было записано, то вы не помните. А бывает еще потом, забываете. А еще бывает такая ситуация, когда разные люди поняли по-разному. И потом начинается, и причем они совершенно искренне поняли это по-разному. И, соответственно, пройдет несколько часов или пройдет день, и совершенно другие впечатления, ощущения, взгляды и кто что должен делать. Okay, as Yulia says, not an action plan, but some similar document we have almost after every meeting. Yes, well, even follow-up notes can be very, very helpful. Okay, right. And that's what a meeting recap may look like. Just look at this. You can thank people who attended the meeting, list what was discussed in the meeting, all those discussion topics, tell about what was decided to do and about the action times, and then you list the date of the next meeting if this has been a regular meeting. So basically, it does not have to be a long letter. In some companies that I have worked in, they just post a very, very brief meeting recap in a work communication channel, whether they use Slack, whether they use Mattermost, whether they use some other thing, but that's what they do, and that's how it works. Okay, so basically we are nearing the end of today's meeting. Я еще раз повторю, чуть-чуть, вот, кстати, замечательный комментарий, minutes или minutes, можно и так произносить это слово, классическое произношение minutes, но сейчас большинство людей все равно говорят minutes, поэтому как вам удобнее, так и говорите. Minutes is most important to follow up. Действительно, вот такая же вещь. И мы как раз видим, например, вот комментарий тоже на YouTube замечательно от Михаила. Protocol of meeting is always needed 101%, even if the meeting was not effective. Yes, that's true, because then you can analyze what made it ineffective. And Mikhail says, I use the same form as it is shown. Okay, that's great. That means that what I have shown was quite important. Now, do you have any questions or comments that I may have overlooked and have left unanswered? We have about 5 minutes more, so I'm prepared to try and answer any questions or the comments. Or if you'd like us to change something for the next lesson, please feel free to write it in the chat, because rest assured, I read all your comments and I try to be flexible so that the lessons would be useful for you. Please remember that we have online exercises which will help you with the language. And even for those who found our lesson a little bit too difficult for them, because I saw a couple of comments like that, do not worry about this. This is only the first lesson. You are only starting, so do the online exercises, and you will notice by the next time that gradually it is easier and easier for you to understand all these things. Ну что ж, подводим итоги. Есть у вас какие-нибудь вопросы или комментарии, которые я пропустил? Напишите, пожалуйста, в чате, например, что вас устроило сегодня в уроке, что, может быть, не устроило, что стоит сделать получше, потому что я действительно читаю комментарии. У нас вот есть опрос, посмотрите, пожалуйста, в котором можно ответить. Там 6 вопросов буквально. И если вы просто напишите в чате, в комментариях, в телеграм-канале, то поверьте, мы все это очень внимательно читаем, потому что нам очень хочется, чтобы вам было комфортно, полезно на этом уроке, и чтобы вам было интересно. И обратите внимание, что у нас именно языковых упражнений много, это интерактивные упражнения. И даже если, например, кому-то было немножко сложновато на уроке, потому что я видел такие комментарии тоже, ничего страшного, это только первое занятие, и после того, как вы сделаете упражнение, то вы почувствуете, что в следующий раз вам будет легче. И затем легче, легче и легче. Вот, есть предложение, например, could you prepare a deeper research, please? Вы знаете, для того, чтобы этот урок собрать и вам эту презентацию собрать, мне пришлось прочитать несколько десятков и статей, и книг по бизнесу, и рекомендаций. Я не говорю про свой сейчас опыт, потому что я основывался именно вот на таких вещах. И, честно говоря, больше информации просто было очень сложно вместить. И так приходилось прям буквально отрывать какую-то информацию, чтобы не пропустить ее. Так, был бы комфорт, если бы говорили чуть медленнее. Хорошо, я учту в следующий раз. Could you describe your background, please? Okay, Russian comments unnecessary for many people. Коллеги, насчет my background. Информация есть, информация о курсе, я поэтому не стал тратить время. Можно прочитать, то мы можем в канал еще раз отправить. Это совершенно не проблема. Okay. So what else? Everything was clear and useful. Thank you. Thank you for the clear accent, well-structured presentation, examples from real life. Well, thank you very much. Все устроило, можно меньше русского, но пояснять сложный момент на английском, несколько раз меняя формулировку. Вы знаете, у нас же разного уровня участники, поэтому кому-то необходим русский язык, и мы видим такие комментарии, а кому-то действительно хотелось бы целиком на английском. Мы пытаемся сделать так, чтобы было полезно всем. Okay. All right. So Pavel says, now I can't decide what was more useful today, English listening practice or meeting life hacks. Okay, let's put it down as both. All right, hopefully. Okay, thank you so much. I was really happy to see you, and I do hope to see you next time. And good luck with the course, and have a nice week. Thank you. Goodbye.